A pivotal part of Biden's campaign was student debt relief, which also became a major source of disappointment for many supporters because he couldn't fully deliver. However, we're going to break down 7 actions Biden took towards providing student debt relief, their varying degrees of success, along with his reform of the medical debt industry. The first initiative he worked on was righting wrongs. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program was to erase debt of borrowers working in government or nonprofit jobs who make consistent monthly payments for 10 years. The program was to provide federal loan relief to individuals who wanted to enter the nonprofit or government workforce where income is lower than the private sector. There was just one problem, though. With extremely tight rules, providers often giving misleading information, and even bank mishaps affecting your own forgiveness, it had a 99% rejection rate, making it worse than useless. It gave false hope, trapping borrowers into believing they'd eventually become debt-free. Recognizing these flaws and the financial distraught this causes our public servants, Biden dismissed these strict guidelines and rectified the program, making them properly accept candidates who met the guidelines and working through the backlog of applicants to provide 1 million public servants the elimination of their loans. But don't worry, Trump has proposed eliminating this program. I guess the billionaires want the apple too. Biden's next drive was for 2 programs: the Borrower Defense Repayment, forgiving borrowers that were defrauded by the university, and Total and Permanent Disability Discharges, canceling loans for borrowers who are totally and permanently disabled. Importantly, Biden achieved these results not through new legislation, since he lacked sufficient congressional support, but by aggressively utilizing existing legal provisions and executive authority. Biden dramatically increased the number of forgiven loans by craftily leveraging data of the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Social Security Administration to automatically identify eligible disabled individuals, ensuring they receive the relief without burdensome application processes, and in doing so, the number of forgiven borrowers were roughly 600,000, equaling all prior discharges in its history. Just as aggressively, with the Borrower Defense Repayment, he used the full extent of this law to provide group discharges to individuals from defrauded universities, along with reversing the DeVos era of delays, errors, and denial of these claims, and moving the amount forgiven from 190,000 to 1.9 million. Another 10x increase. Real forgiveness for real borrowers. Biden's first broad student loan forgiveness policy, by using the COVID-19 emergency to invoke the HEROES Act that allowed the Educational Secretary to waive or modify federal loans. He could use this act to ensure borrowers weren't placed in a worse financial situation during a national emergency. This was his 4th program to cut student debt and amounted to $10,000 in forgiveness per borrower earning less than $125,000 per year. Relief for 40 million Americans, but the Supreme Court rejected it along party lines. The only good news was one provision was deemed justified by the court, giving payments and interest payments pauses to borrowers during the COVID-19 emergency. After it was struck down, he continued to try with his 5th program, the SAVE Act, an income-based repayment plan which put 5% of discretionary income that is above 225% of the poverty line, which means you take the federal poverty line times 2.25, which is about $35,000. Then for every dollar you earn above that, 5% of it needs to be paid back towards your student loans. And after 20 years, this wipes out your debt and is a complete repayment of your loans. The only difference is for graduate programs, it's 10% of your income above 225% of the poverty line and 25 years of repayment. Finally, for debt under $10K, you would only need 10 years of repayment. This keeps monthly spending down and appropriate to your income level, meaning you have more discretionary spending to help the economy move forward instead of using all of your income going towards a debt that you took out when you were 18. A key provision was it didn't allow for interest accrual if the payment was made. So as long as you made the minimum payment, you would not get capitalization, which is the unpaid interest added to your principal, leading to the spiraling of debt that can keep you trapped for life even if you're making payments. Unfortunately, the SAVE Act was blocked by the 8th District Appeals of Court. However, he did get $5.5 billion in forgiveness for almost 500,000 Americans through repayment before the plan was shut down. He continued to push, this time on balances that had ballooned due to accumulating interest that had surpassed the original principal. The plan was to provide $20,000 in interest relief for borrowers whose balances exceeded the original loan amount and earned less than $125,000 per year. The proposal would require you to be in the student loan forgiveness plan and would be automatically applied once you're in the program. However, the push was to get it through before the election, but these bills take time. And due to the time it takes legal challenges to get through the court, Trump had already won re-election. His last action, 7th, if you're keeping count, on student loan debt was extremely important but overlooked. Biden directed the DOJ to loosening standards on the student loan discharged through bankruptcy, meaning you no longer have to prove undue hardship to pay the loan, a high standard that was met only 1% of the time, with the new rules requiring that you need to show that the debtor lacks the ability to repay the loan, inability to pay the loan is likely to persist, and the debtor has acted in good faith in attempt to repay the loan. You might not think this is a huge change, but it changes the number from student debt relief, having partial or full dischargeable approval jump from 1% to 99%. Meaning you can finally be free of these loans and they don't cripple your ability to survive and come back after bankruptcy. Finally, he took on predatory medical debt. For starters, making sure a medical emergency doesn't ruin your credit score, with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau banning medical debt on consumer credit reports. We don't want America's poorly implemented medical industry tearing down every other aspect of your life. And not only is this wrong, it is also a poor predictor of non-medical loan repayment. Another implementation of this rule was closing a loophole where debt collectors would weaponize the credit report systems to harass and threaten people into paying medical bills they don't even owe, requiring that the debt collectors confirm that the debts are accurate, valid, and substantiated before trying to collect the debt, or by requiring that individuals that are 300% below the poverty line can't have their medical debt sold to these aggressive and coercive third-party debt collectors. And finally, VP Harris led medical debt forgiveness to work with the states to eliminate medical debt from over 750,000 Americans, and with two leading examples being Cook County and New Jersey having respectively $382 million for 210,000 residents and $220 million for 120,000 residents in medical debt eliminated. I know we all wanted Biden to have success with the student loan plans, but he delivered all that was possible with questionable legal losses, no support from Congress, a Republican Supreme Court, and with only the power of the executive branch, Biden did what he could, delivering relief for 5.3 million borrowers totaling $189 billion, discharging loans for public servants, the disabled, the defrauded, changing bankruptcy standards, and putting guidelines around medical debt. It's a drop in the bucket for student loans, but he went all out. He pushed hard. He had 7 different avenues on student loans. Let it not go unsaid that he didn't have the courts or Congress, leaving few legal avenues to provide the relief he wanted. What more could he have done? And comically, the backlash for not being able to implement these programs through no fault of his own was to appoint Trump with the full power of the Senate and the House. Let's see how that goes. In the next series, we're going to talk about the economic accomplishments, like how he invested in America's infrastructure to create jobs, and setting a standard minimum tax rate of 15% for large multinational corporations to prevent tax evasion.